Welcome to the Martial Truth, and in this episode we're going to talk about the different stages of training. So this is an extremely important topic because as those of us that are training a long time, I'm entering my 45th year of training. I started when I was 15 years old. I'm going to be 60 in a few months, and now having the ability to look back and previous in all the different years I've trained and all the different arts I've trained in, I now understand the importance of understanding how the training has to change. In other words, the different stages that you need to go through to maintain your skill set, but also making sure you begin to train in a way that's not going to damage your body. The goal is to be able to train until you die. That's the goal. And again, how you're going to train is going to change. So when I started at 15, and when people in general walk into a martial arts school, they begin training. They walk in, they don't know anything, and now we're teaching them these movements that are very alien to them and foreign and feel completely awkward, right? So they start training, and we push the fitness aspect. We want them to be in shape. So they go through all different things. We have them, doing physical exercise, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever. We have them hitting the heavy bag, hitting the makiwara. We have them paired off with partners. In the case of an art like jiu-jitsu or judo, they're learning how to fall, which is very physical. They're getting, eventually they're getting thrown and they're hitting the mat pretty hard, and they're learning how to slap out so they can jump right back up and continue the training. So all these different things we go through, and we're training hard. I mean, we're younger. I started when I was 15. My wife likes to tell the story of we were sitting with a couple of senior martial artists at dinner. This is probably, I was in my mid-20s, maybe around 30 years old. And they say, well, you're lucky, Mike. You're a natural. And I remember my wife kind of made a face. And they said, yeah, you're a natural. You pick up things very quick, and it comes easy to you. And when we left the dinner and got in the car, my wife turned to me and said, it really irks me when I hear people say that, like, you're a natural and this all comes natural to you. And, basically what they're saying is, well, you don't have to put in the hard work. It comes so easy to you. And my wife said, if they ever saw how you trained when you were a teenager into your 20s and into your still then, probably around 30, she says, it really does a disservice to the fact of how hard you've worked. And, when I was a teenager, there were days when, especially in the summer when I didn't have school and if I didn't have to work, I would train 6-8 hours a day. I mean, I just loved martial arts, and I trained very, very hard. And again, when you're 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and you're in top physical condition like I was, in high school I was a gymnast for a short time. So the thing is I could train like that, and I wasn't getting hurt. My body was resilient, right? I was young. I could go hard and not worry about, causing my body injury. And then as I begun to become more proficient in the different moves that I was being instructed in, obviously it becomes easier too. You're not working as hard. Your body's not working as hard because you're moving in a more precise manner. So as you become more precise and you master the moves, right, so to speak, you're using less energy and your body's moving in a way that's much healthier. So that's initially when we're, at a young age. The other thing that's important to do is, and I think it's something that martial artists don't do enough, is recognize that some of the things we do and we're taught are not the healthiest things for the body. And it's time that we need to take a look at that and step back and maybe make some changes into, especially, I'll use karate as an example. When I see so many high-level dons getting hip and knee replacement, because of some of the movements they've done repeatedly over years and years and years, and the wear and tear they've put on their body, some of it's unavoidable. I have a bad left knee I was born with. I can't really do anything about it, right? So I deal with it, and I make adjustments, right? But, some people trained in a way where they beat on their bodies so much that instead of moving in a way where as they got older, they were still able to move, it started to affect them in the opposite. So it's important we take a look at that, and we have to be honest and say, okay, let's figure out what we're doing wrong and fix it. But sadly, there's too much of the, well, my teacher said to do it like this, so we have to do it like that. Every other sport you look at, there's been advances. There's been advances in the physical training regimen. There's been advances in the moves they do. There's that core of, the way it is, but they've also made changes to try to improve the way they do things. All right. For some reason in martial arts, we are very against that, and it's a huge mistake. We need to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of research in movement and how we should move. So initially in the early stages of training, you're trying to remember the moves. You're trying to move the way your sensei or your shifu or your instructor wants you to perform the moves. And in doing that, you're punching harder and faster, you're kicking harder and faster, and you're building up your body and the power in your body to actually do these moves. And you feel pretty good. So that's in your teens, 20s, 30s, okay? You can punch the makiwara a lot, I used to laugh. One of the Ishinryu teachers, Angiweizu, used to say, 500 times a day you punch, okay? I think that's a bit extreme, right? But he's just giving you an example of you should work hard and train hard on the makiwara, right? So the thing is though, there's going to come a time then where your body begins to change. And it happens to all of us, and it's because we're getting older, all right? So if your skill has been developed and you have really good technique and you're using proper body mechanics, well, then you can maintain your speed and power until you're older, okay? But things are still going to change. So, for instance, when I first went to Okinawa, I was in my late 20s. And I was sitting with Master Kichiro Shimabuku in a restaurant after training one night, and I was asking him a bunch of questions. And one of the questions I asked was, so Sensei, we're training kids, like, what's the story? And he said, it's different, Mike. It's different. And I said to him, well, I see there's some, young kids in your dojo that have black belts. And he goes, well, it's different. It's not the same as an adult black belt, but they've worked very hard, and they know the kata, and they know the stuff they're supposed to know. So, yeah. But it's different. They're kids. And I said to him, well, what about women training in the dojo? Because my first instructor was a bit of a Neanderthal when it came to women in the dojo. And, I said to him, I wanted to understand. And he goes, well, women are different. He goes, they shouldn't be held to the same physical standards, like physical strength standards as a man. They're a woman. They should be judged individually for their skill and how they move and their own power and how it's improved. And I said, okay, good, Sensei. I said, Sensei, what about someone who comes into the dojo that's a little bit older, like maybe starts in their 50s or 60s and decides they want to start doing karate? And he says, it's different. And he says, the training has to be adjusted. You can't expect them to move like a young man. And you have to adjust the training for them. And he said the same thing of someone that has some type of physical liability or physical limitation, right? You have someone who maybe can't do certain moves because they have an injury or they were born with something that's not right. Okay, so you don't force them and say, no, you have to do the move exactly the way these other people are doing the move. No. What you do is you adjust that move. You figure out a way as the instructor to adjust that move so that person with the physical limitation is able to do it. But it will be different than the other people, and that's okay. That's our job as instructors, is to be able to figure out a way for every individual, no matter what their limitations are, to be able to practice martial arts. So hearing that, was important to me. And then, a few years later, I went to Fukuoka, Japan to train with Shitama Manzo in Sosu Shitsuru Jiu-Jitsu. And one of the questions I asked him was, I had noticed two elderly gentlemen practicing judo mat work. And these guys were definitely at minimum in their 70s, and they could have been even older than that. And I watched them doing mat work for a solid 30 minutes straight, where they were on the mat really trying to control each other and, in the way they do in judo. So, that made me ask Shitama Sensei, so Sensei, in jiu-jitsu, we take these big high falls, big flying through the air, slapping out, hitting the mat. I said, what about as we get older? And he says, oh, you do old man falls. Okay. I looked at him. I'd never heard that term, old man falls. I says, well, what do you mean, Sensei? He says, well, you change the way you fall. You don't take the big hard falls. You do more of a rollout, or you just go around and go down with the technique. But yeah, as we get in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, you cannot take those big falls a lot, And, I will say in my school, and myself, pushing 60, and a few of my students are in their mid-60s, a bunch of them are still taking some of the falls. But they have begun to transition, because I told them all it takes is that one bad fall, and then you're hurt. So they've begun to transition into what we call the old man falls, which, may not be too politically correct, but in the martial arts, it's about reality, all right? And we're all getting older, and we will become old men and old women, and we have to adjust our training so we can keep training. So this leads me to another point. I've trained in a lot of martial arts with a lot of top instructors all over the world. So one of the things, and I'll tell you this story, my first instructor was overweight, and I didn't really see him train that much. And I went to attend a seminar. I was studying oikddojo, and I went to attend a seminar with a senior teacher from Japan who came in. And he was Hachidan in Kendo, oikddojo, and Jodo. And he had just had a surgery for throat cancer about 6 or 8 months previous. And I attended the seminar, and I didn't do Kendo. Later on, I did Kendo for about 2 years, but I'd never done Kendo at that point. So I watched when he did the Kendo portion of the seminar. And, he was thin. And he went out, and I watched him fight about 30 people, one right after the other. And he started with the little kids and went up to senior, and then got to Shodans, Nidans, Sandans. And he finished fighting 2 6th dans back to back. And I sat there amazed, and I also thought to myself, well, my karate sensei could never do this. Like, he'd pass out by the third person because he was, overweight and not in shape. And it made me start to question certain things. So one of the things that I see that happens with people in terms of training is as they become more senior, it becomes more about talking about martial arts and less about doing martial arts. And what I've always tried to do is I've always tried to remember and go back to what made me love martial arts to begin with. And that was the movement. I just loved these moves. I thought it was fantastic, and then the self-defense aspect I thought was fantastic. But then again, that goes back to the movement, right? And then as I started learning various arts, whether it be Japanese swordsmanship or Okinawan kobudo, whatever it was, the variation of the movements, how you use the different weapons, how you use like the differences in jiu-jitsu as opposed to karate, the differences in Chen style Tai Chi Chuan practical method from karate and jiu-jitsu, and feeding crane kung fu, how the movement is, the similarities, but then also the differences. And to me, it's fantastic. I love the physical movement. So I've always, even though as I've gone up and become very senior in a lot of martial arts, I always remembered, okay, what got you into martial arts and what made you love it so much? And that was the physical aspect, the movement, the training. And that's why to this day, that's why I concentrate the most, So I try to avoid politics like the plague, and I concentrate on my own physical training. And that's what keeps me happy. What I also noticed with a lot of the early pioneers of these arts we do, you saw a lot of them as they became more senior, they got heavier, put on a lot of weight, and many of them stopped actually practicing the physical aspect of the art. And you say to yourself, well, why is that? So for some reasons is they lost their way. It became more about acquiring rank. It became more about the politics and the grand poobah syndrome, where they come into the dojo and they become really good counters. They sit down, they count, and they're not out there leading by example. When I first went to Okinawa that first time, I'd explained to Master Shimabuku that I'd left my first teacher and I was on my own and I had a handful of students and I wanted to set up a direct relationship with him. So right off the bat, he said that was fine. What I've always liked about him was, even if people within the organization don't get along, he deals with everyone. He looks at himself as he's the father, and he may have two sons that are like this, but he still has to deal with both sons. So I always respected. Didn't care that he was still involved with my first instructor. I didn't care. I was just worrying about me, right? And he gave me some advice when I first went there that first time. And some of the things he said to me were, if you drink too much and eat too much, if you allow yourself to get fat, your students will leave you. If you only talk about karate, but you don't do karate, your students will leave you. The sensei must always lead by example. If the sensei acts the way he should act, if he keeps himself in shape, and if he's out there training, leads by example, then his dojo will be successful. I was like 28 years old, and coming out of the situation I had come out of, I took that to heart. And when I got back, I said, that's what I'm going to do. And that's how I'm going to lead my life. So, I'm the type of guy that I'll think of something martial arts related. I'll be walking in my house and I'll stop a second and actually work that move. So if I didn't have a dojo, I just train in my living room. That's the way I am. I want to train, right? I love to teach. I love to watch people get better as I instruct them and go up to high levels. I mean, in my New York school, I have students with me over 30 years, and to see where they've come from in their own training and their own journey, I have tremendous satisfaction from that. I have some young students out here in Arizona, as well as some older students, and to see how they're progressing and how the training's going with them, and that makes things interesting. So the teenagers I have, those guys I push pretty hard. I ride them pretty hard. I make them work, all right? But I also have some students that are in their 50s, right? So with that, that's adjusted. They're not going like the teenagers. They shouldn't go like the teenagers. If they go like the teenagers, they're going to get hurt, right? And then if they're hurt, they can't train. So you have to make those adjustments. I think with a lot of the early senior dons that trained in Okinawa and Japan in the 50s and 60s and then brought martial arts back here, many of them were young. They were between the ages of, let's say, 17 or 18 and 25, where they were training overseas. Many of them were in the military. They're in top physical condition. So obviously, they're training real hard when they're there in karate and these different arts, whether it be judo or whatever, and they're training hard and their bodies can take it because they're young. It was never brought up, well, do I train differently as I get older? Do I have to adjust my training? So when they came back, they only knew one way to train, and they kept trying to train that way. And then what started happening is they started getting these nagging injuries. And this is not the case in all of them, but in many of them, it's quite possible this is what was happening. And then as these nagging injuries kept adding up, and then they started putting on the weight, and then it became a problem, and it was just self-perpetuating, where the injuries, because they didn't change and adjust their training, they just kept going the same way that they had done when they were, teenagers in their early 20s. And they never took a step back and said, well, how do I have to adjust now? So even myself, only within the last last really few years, where I've realized now, okay, my body's sending me a message, and I better listen to that message. So in Chen Tai Chi, practical method, we have a form called the Erlu, which is cannon fist. The whole form is all about fighting. That's it. And when you do it, it lends itself to doing with a lot of fa jin and power. And about a year ago, I decided to do one in the backyard. It's on the YouTube channel. You could see it. And I did virtually the whole form with power. And it basically knocked me on my butt for the rest of the day. And I realized that, because the form's very long. And I realized that, I can still do it, but I'm going to pay a price for it. So now what I do is I've begun to modify where I don't do fa jin on every move in the form. So I pick and choose where I want to issue. And it allows me then, when I finished the form, doing with power, I can do another one if I want. Or I can go into one of the other arts I train and practice that. So I'm realizing there's certain things going on because I am getting older, right? And I'm making those adjustments. So one of the reasons I wanted to put this as a podcast is I want people to understand, especially you guys that are now in your 20s and 30s, that martial arts is a lifetime study if you want. And if you do it properly, you'll have high health. I'm still very fast and I still can generate tremendous power. I'm going to be 60 in a couple of months. I have students in New York that can do the same thing. All right. I received a DVD from Master Shimabuku in Okinawa last week of him doing all the kata. He was probably between the age of 75 and 78. He does all the Ishinryu kata one right after the other, including all the weapons forms. And you say to yourself, wow, like the power and the speed. He's in his mid to late 70s, and he's still moving with power and speed. But what do you look? Well, he keeps himself in good physical condition. He still runs all the time, right? He plays golf, and he practices martial arts. I know he also does some lightweight lifting. I've seen the weightlifting equipment in his yard in Okinawa, and he even has some weightlifting equipment in the dojo, the Hambu dojo in Okinawa. So he's kept himself very physically fit, and in so doing, he's able to move at a high level and maintain speed and power even into his mid and upper 70s. And now he's in his early 80s. And I saw him in 2019, and he still had speed and power. So again, part of it, though, is, remember what I just said, he's kept himself in good physical condition. So it's important to maintain your weight, not get too heavy. And again, for all of us, it becomes difficult. I jokingly say to people, I have to adjust my diet every few years. My metabolism, I'm just not burning calories like I used to. So what do? I watch. I cut back on what I eat. I don't have big meals. Certain types of foods, I avoid. I'm not having a lot of fast food. I virtually don't have fast food. I mostly cook at home now. Right? So these things all come into play. The other thing is you should be going, if you get to a certain age, you should be going for medical checkups. At least every year, go for that medical checkup. Make sure everything's good. If you have a physical problem, you feel something's not right, don't wait. Go. The goal is we want to be training. Like I tell people all the time, I'm going into old age kicking and screaming. I'm not going to go, I can't do that anymore. I can't do that anymore until my body really doesn't let me do it. I'm still doing jump kicks. I'm still doing flying kicks. I'm doing jump spinning kicks on the heavy bag. The teenagers, it annoys them because they're like, how can you do that, right? When I was first training these teenagers, I had to really get them to actually attack. They're like, well, what if we hit you, Sensei? I said, well, if you hit me, that's my problem. The guy out there is not going to take it easy on me. You have to attack. Just because I'm getting older, I have to figure out at this age, well, how do I have to move to deal with that fast attack? So we still have to maintain our ability, but our understanding of how to use that ability has to change. We can't be doing the crazy physical activity that we did in our 20s. We may not be able to do that in our 60s and 70s. We have to make adjustments. The problem is, if you don't make those adjustments, what's going to happen is you're going to start to put on weight. Your body's going to start to break down. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. Now you become the counter instead of the worker-outer. Now you become the guy who watches instead of the guy who leads. Okay? So the idea is you have to maintain your fitness level. And again, martial arts may not be enough to do that. You may have to do some extracurricular stuff. Riding a bike, walking, running, okay? Calisthenics, all right? These are all things, lifting weights in moderation. I don't think you want to be pushing, crazy weight, all right? If that's your thing, God bless you, okay? The other thing is, should I be hitting the Makiwara 500 times? No, you have to cut back on the Makiwara too. All right, Makiwara training is great, but as you get older, you shouldn't be hitting it like you were in your 20s. It's just not healthy for you. Okay, breaking things. If you're one of these guys that likes to break, okay, but as you get older, not very healthy. Okay, and again, for me personally, I was never really into breaking. I just never saw the point of it. Whatever. If that's your thing, fine. So, stages of training. We walk in. We're young. We're probably in the best shape of our life. We're learning these movements. The movements get better. We become very physically powerful. We learn to move, hopefully in a highly skillful way. Now we have some ability. We're training. Our power and speed are increasing. Our abilities are increasing. Okay. Now we're in our 20s, 30s. We're in our 40s. Probably as a martial artist, if you start at a certain age, like when I did 15 or in your 20s, you're probably in your prime in your around 35 to 55 if you maintain your physical fitness. If you let yourself go, you won't be. All right? So the idea is we start and it goes up like this, and it's a gradual going up, and it should be a gradual going back down. It shouldn't be we go up and then there's a huge drop off. And all of a sudden, what happened? Well, what happened was you let yourself go. You allow your fitness levels to go down. You got into more politics or more counting, not physically teaching and physically showing your students how to do. Lead by example. Move, move, move. Okay? Practice your skill set. Don't let your skill set fade. If you do this, if you maintain your fitness level, if you continue to remember why you love the martial arts, which was the physical movement, you will be able to maintain your physical ability and your physical fitness level into an advanced age. I'm hoping in 10 years, when I'm 70, I'm still sitting here pretty much looking the same way. I'm sure there'll be more gray. I'm sure there'll be more wrinkles. But not that I've allowed myself to go. I don't see it happening. I just won't let it happen. Right? I take personal pride in the fact that as I've gotten older, I'm still able to, hang and bang with guys much younger than me. All right? And it's something you should want to be able to do too. Okay? So no excuses. The training's important. The different levels of training is important. We have to make those adjustments as we get older. If you do that, you will be able to have a long, healthy, successful life in general, not just in martial arts. And the whole idea as a martial artist is you should live a long, healthy life and then just die. Okay? Not where you're unable to move for a lot of years or you're sickly for a lot of years. That's not what we want. We want a long, healthy life where we feel great, and then we get near the end, boom, we're gone. All right? So, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm sorry I'm dropping this one late. Actually injured myself last week, so I had to take it easy for a little bit. Back on track now. I'll be in New York next week teaching the seminars. I'll give the information if you want to contact James Waller, who's the student that took over my school in New York. I'll also be hosting a push hands workshop with Master Chen Jianghua at my school here in Wittmann in July. So I'll be putting out information on that in the near future. And keep training. Watch what you eat. Maintain your exercise. Maintain your fitness level. All right? I appreciate it. If you like what you saw, click the like. Please subscribe. We're closing in on 11,000 subscribers. We'd like to get there. All right? And, share. Share it with your friends. If you like the podcast, share it. Let's get it out there. All right? Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.